Sometimes my hair looks really sick in person and I see it in the camera and it just looks like I'm bald. Hey Hoties, welcome to the channel. My name is hautemesstom and thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today we are going to do an eye for an eye. The Charlotte Tilbury Hypnotizing Eye Pops in Smokey Quartz versus the rest of my makeup collection. If you are new to the concept of eye for an eye, what I do is after I buy a new eye product, I go through my collection and I try to dupe it out. So if it's an eyeshadow palette, I will try to dupe it as best I can with my collection. And the whole goal is to see whether or not the new thing I brought into my collection truly added any value to my makeup collection. Sometimes what you find out is that, yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Or there's an in-between space where it does because it's really different from what you have, but you could get the same effect with what you have, but this kind of does it all in one thing. Then you learn that it did add value to your collection. And it's not to say not to buy new things. That's not what the goal or the spirit of this video is. It's just take a step back. Perhaps you have something in your collection that you could achieve this with already. I just find that this kind of like content or doing these kind of activities, whether or not you're doing an eye for an eye where you actually have both things, or you're just duping out the vibes at home while you're looking online, trying to see if like this is gonna really do it for you. If you are new to my channel, hello, welcome. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. My channel in the makeup world is really about loving my makeup collection first and foremost. But obviously every now and then I bring something new into my collection. For example, the Charlotte Tilbury Hypnotizing Eye Pop in Smokey Quartz. But I try to really discern what is going to add value to my collection before I bring it in. And I try to be really critical of new makeup releases because they really do a good job of marketing at us in a way that makes it really enticing when we already have the thing that they are marketing to us. There's no way that we could all buy everything, that everything isn't new. So if that kind of content sounds good to you, like loving your collection and just appreciating what you have, I would love to have you subscribe. Make sure you like this video because that really helps me. And I'm on patreon.com if you would like to support me there. I do 2 additional videos for patrons, and it doesn't matter what level of patronage that you join at Patreon. Everyone gets those 2 videos, so it's more of like a, if you would like to send some money my way to the channel, you can. If not, no worries. I just appreciate that you're here. Let's get started. What you're gonna get sent to is footage that I took overhead where I swatch this against a bunch of eyeshadows that I already have. And then the next segment, I love a segment. I got called out. My friend Tiffany was over and they were like, you really love a segment. And I do love a segment. Also, segments you can record at different times. You don't need to do it all at once. And I love that. I love recording a video in small bits over a course of time. So we do segments and it's the best. And I love that for me. So here's the overhead footage. Here it is, the Charlotte Tilbury Hypnotizing Pop Shot in the shade Smokey Quartz. I did, in a critical sass, say that I thought that this packaging was a little bit hokey, but now that I have it in my hands, I do like it a little bit more. It's not really as cheap looking as it looks. It still feels as like lightweight as other Charlotte Tilbury products, which is whatever. It's like, I don't know what I would want this to be. So it's like cute for what it is, the packaging. I don't know if I would want something heavier than this. If the idea of this is to like take this on the go, then I guess it's kind of doing its job, except I would imagine that if you were throwing this in your purse and like traveling with it a lot, that these gemstones wouldn't be long for this world. Also, we're not gonna talk about my nails. Okay, we're just not gonna talk about them. Here is the shade, the Smokey Quartz shade. It's really beautiful. I'm gonna get it closer to the camera. Here's what it looks like. So it's a pretty unassuming shade. What's interesting is whenever you have it on your finger versus when you have it on your eye, it looks so smooth here. And then when you get it on your eye, and even in the swatch on my wrist, is a little more sparkly. So that's what I really like about this. So I'm wondering if anything else in my collection will compare to this. I'm assuming that something will, but I just want to go through it with you to see what we can do. I just adjust my lighting so that things looked a little bit lighter. This is the Dior Quint in the colorway New Look. And the first thing I thought of was this shade up here. It's looking pretty close. And this has that same quality of being sparklier on the eye than it is in the pan or on the finger. But I do think it's gonna be a little bit darker. Oh, it's a lot darker. It would be like if this just was like turned down so much. Smokey Quartz has a little bit of like a like a purple undertone to it, a slight purple, and maybe leaning a little bit rosy, but not completely. It's like it has some intrigue to the undertone, whereas this one seems a little bit more straightforward, not as much going on as far as like interesting shifts. The next thing I grabbed was my Gucci Palette Beauté de You. I immediately thought of this shade down here. I think it might be close, but I think it might not have the sparkles that we have in the Smokey Quarts. So here it is up close. It's like a taupey shade, so it's a little bit cool toned leaning. It's really, really pretty. It basically has the undertones of Smokey Quarts without the glitter on top. And the glitter in the Smokey Quarts is more cool tone leaning. It's like more of a silver sparkle. This is just like the more muted version, like the classier version maybe. Not really classier. I think you can be classy with sparkle, but it's like the if you didn't want to do the most version of Smokey Quarts. This is a palette I made with some Natasha Denona shades of mine. And I thought of this one right here, and this almost looks like it would be like the green version, but I'm more interested in this one. I think it might be a little too purpley. I believe this came out of the 28 pan purple blue. This one has a little bit more promise of intrigue. It's a little bit shinier than the last two. And I don't know if it will read sparkly, but I'm thinking it's gonna be like way more purple. Not quite right in many ways. It's not as sparkly. It's a little bit darker than this. I can see some of it in here, but I don't think that it's like a really perfect dupe for what I'm trying to do here. This is Mothership 3, and I kind of thought of this, but now that I'm seeing it in this lighting, it's gonna be way too blue. But for the purposes of just seeing, let's get a little bit on my finger. You know, it's kind of the similar thing, and Pat McGrath shimmers like this, they have some sparkle to them. So I think it's gonna have perhaps the same sparkly effect, maybe a little less sparkle, but have the sparkles, but it's gonna be way too blue. As you can see, it does have the sparkles, not as turned up as Smokey Quarts, but yeah, it's just too dark and too blue. Staying on the Mothership train, this is Divine Rose 1. This is gonna be too light, but it is like a taupier shade, so it might add something to it. Unlike the last Pat McGrath shade I just swatched, this one's not gonna have as much sparkle to it. I think it's gonna read more like the one from the Gucci palette. It's not as off as I thought it was going to be. It is a little bit closer. This has that like purple something to it, and this shade just doesn't have that. It's like doesn't have the same kind of depth to it. And then the last Pat McGrath palette I grabbed was Mothership 1, and I thought this shade right here could be a good contender because it has a little bit of that cool toned bit to it. It's not going to be as sparkly. I think we can see that right here. And I think it's going to be too dark. It's like something, but not quite it. And which that seems to be what we keep finding is that the Charlotte Tilbury formula, if you took all of these and bunched them together and added more shimmer to it, you're going to get that. Charlotte Tilbury seemingly has done the work for us because I could easily layer something shimmery over top of these, and we might do that as a power activity later on to see if we can get something closer to the Charlotte Tilbury. But if you are into this kind of thing and you don't want to layer things up, this might be worth it for you. I'm just saying that as of right now, just like looking at it. Then I grabbed some of my Rowan quads. This is the 52 Degrees Cool. I thought of this shade, but it is now looking way, way too gray. But maybe this shade right here could be a little bit closer. It does have a little bit of that taupey bronze to it, which is what we're looking for. And Rowan does bring the shimmer. It's a little chunkier than what we have going on up here with the one from Charlotte Tilbury. It is kind of close. What I was really hoping when I actually did buy the Charlotte Tilbury one, I really love the Rowan quads, but I was hoping it was going to give me the effect of a Rowan shadow with better longevity. So that's why I ended up really buying this. Okay, I'm going to swatch the other arm starting now, and so I'm going to do a new fresh swatch on my right arm of the Charlotte Tilbury Eye Pop. I also grabbed the 1111 for this shade up here. Now, they wouldn't be exactly the same because this shade in the 1111 has like some blue sparkles to it, which the Charlotte Tilbury doesn't. And I think it's going to be a little too cool toned leaning. And much sheer. It's not as off as you'd think, but it's just like it's a completely different thing. I think the Rowan shade is more concerned about leaving the shimmer with like a stain of gray as opposed to like being a fully pigmented thing. At least that particular shade in the Rowan Quad. I also thought of the Hella palette. I was kind of thinking of this shade down here, but it's not right. It's not right. It's like not worth swatching. Not right. Let me see if I have anything in my self-made palettes that I've done relatively recently. Let's watch this one. This one I'm pretty sure is from the Natasha Denona 28 Pan Green. So it is gonna have a green hue to it. I'm wondering if it's gonna have the sparkle, the razzle dazzle. It's much more pigmented, but it's so pretty. I love that shade. Every time I build my own palette, I like try to work it in, but yeah, it's not the same color at all. I'm not sure it's sparkly. It's more of a metallic. There like is some shimmer particles in there, but I think it's supposed to read more as a metallic. My favorite thing to do with this so far is to like pat it on the outer corner and then blend the sparkles and what pigment is left towards the center of my lid. And I think if I tried to do that with this, I wouldn't have the sparkle. It would just be like a gradient from like really metallic to just a little less metallic as it gets closer to the center of my lid. I don't think there's gonna be anything in this one, but we'll just double check. Oh, this one right here looks like it could potentially be something. This I think is from the 28 Pan Purple. I don't know where any of these Natasha Denona shades go, and unlike Laura May Beauty, I was not intelligent enough to mark them. I think this is going to be darker, but it does have some sparkle in it, so it might have a similar effect, just more purple and deeper. It's actually not far off. It could use just a little bit of sparkle and it's like a little too dark. It's like I have a lot of stuff that is similar, but nothing that is like nailing it. None of these formulas really have like sparkle to them, but I am going to swatch this one because it does look a little bit promising, but that is way too gold. Oh yeah, it's like not even close. It has some shine to it, so it's like almost the right kind of formula. Yeah, I don't really see anything in here either. Like potentially this one, but it's gonna be too light and again, too metallic, kind of losing the specialness of the sparkle. It's darker than I thought, and it does kind of look like the base tone, but again, it's just like not quite the same thing. What I wanna do now is look at some of them and do some toppers. So I think the shade from the Gucci palette was pretty close. And then I also feel like this one right here was pretty close. Okay, I think it was from this Mothership Divine Rose one. I'm gonna go wash my arms and then I will be back. So what I'm going to do now is I'm gonna swatch the Charlotte Tilbury at the top again. And I do feel like the Gucci one was the closest base that we had. And so what I want to do is to do a couple swatches of the Gucci underneath it. And then what I thought we could do, I brought some topper shades or things that I typically will use as a topper shade out. And so the first thing I thought of was How Many Carats from Fenty. And I thought maybe if I put that over top of the Gucci shade, we might get a similar effect. It's pretty close. It's not exact, but it's pretty close. I also brought out the Dior New Look again because this kind of performs as a topper, but this looks a little too warm to potentially work as the exact kind of thing. And it's also not sparkly enough. So as a kind of wild card topper, I also thought maybe this shade from the Mothership one, it has some blue to it. And so this shade has some of that like hints of purple. I'm wondering if this might balance out by the purple not being in the base. It's not quite the same. It's not sparkly enough. I like the How Many Carats the best. So I also decided that I liked the Pat McGrath shade here as a good base. I'm gonna try How Many Carats on top of this one from the Pat McGrath palette. The sparkles just aren't big enough in this How Many Carats. But it's doing the trick. It really is. Yeah, that looks a lot like it. I think we've done it. It's the Pat McGrath topped with the Fenty. I will top one with this shade because this is like a nice topper as well, and it has some flakier glitters in it. But I do think that that makes it a little too warm, whereas the How Many Carats really emphasizes what cool tones are in there. So I think we're gonna do that. So we're gonna try these two up against each other on the eye and see if I really needed Smokey Quartz. Now, need is a strong word, but did it add any value to my collection? I'm gonna put the Charlotte Tilbury on my left eye to spice things up because I almost every time put the original thing on my right eye. So we're spicing things up today. So normally in my Eye4AnEye, I don't really include reviews in them, but I figured that I have actually been playing around with this quite a bit to be able to report back to you. And I'm going to talk about that as I'm applying it and probably in like my final thoughts with the experiment today. Here's what I have like found so far is that it needs a primer. It needs a tacky primer. I tried it with no primer and it literally fell from my eye just right across my cheeks and I was like, noted. Not that I ever really put on eyeshadow without an eyeshadow primer, but it was like an alarm, like there was nothing left on my eye. It wasn't even like a city grossness on my eye. It was just like, just not there anymore. And then I tried just a regular eyeshadow primer, not one like particularly made to hold up against shimmers or anything like that. And that worked better, but I did end the day with not much pigment, but a lot of shimmer still on my eye. Almost in the way that a Rowan quad did. It was more of like a rock and roll, like my eye makeup was falling apart and less like a no kind of situation. And we've had a more elaborate conversation about what that rock and roll look is in my Rowan video. I'm gonna link that up in the cards for you to check out if you are interested in that. So if you like the effect of the Rowan quads and you're okay with the way those crease, you might enjoy this. I have also tried this with glitter glue or the NYX glitter primer, which is what I have been using. I get the most longevity out of that. I got like 6 hours of wear before the creasing really started. So what I'm going to say kind of in general about this product is that it's certainly like an evening time thing and it's certainly something that you're not gonna want to put on to wear for like a whole day. Even though I had done that and I still thought it looked really chic. I just think that this is not something that lends itself to like longevity. You can choose for $34 whether or not that is something that you're okay with. I'm not here to be like the arbiter about what is and isn't worth $34. I'm just telling you that's kind of been my experience with it so far. But I will tell you that I've considered buying more because I really like the way they look. I would probably buy the blue one and maybe the green one. Probably none of the other ones. I do think if I went too light, I would lose the effect of it that I want. On my left eye, I'm going to prime with the NYX glitter primer and then I'm going to apply the Charlotte Tilbury how I've been enjoying applying it. But unlike the Rowan quads, which I discussed in the Rowan video, having primer underneath it does not make it crease faster. I did find that whenever I was wearing the Rowan eyeshadows, which are like a creamy, waxy formula, if you're not aware of the Rowan formula, I did find that when I put a primer underneath that it wanted to crease faster. It was like much better on a bare eye. Basically how I've been applying this is I'll take my finger and I will just tap some on the outer portion of the eye and blend it in. And then just as I have some left on my finger, tap that into the inner portion of my eyelid. So then I will get a brush, like it's a little bit fluffier, and just blend out the edges, spread the glitter a little bit more evenly distributed. And that's like the one and done eye look that I typically do. So most of the pigment in the shadow stays out here and then I'm just kind of dragging shimmer more so than the pigment to the center of my eye. And I have found that just to be my favorite way to wear it. I have just kind of like smeared it all over and just kind of blend it out, but I do kind of like having that little bit, like very small bit of like a cat eye effect, and then the eye just kind of looks wet. I love it. Something that will be a little bit different on this eye is that because I'm using two shadows and I'm using two different things, distributing the product evenly I think is going to be harder because it's not an all-in-one situation. But just like with my left eye, I'm going to take some of the NYX glitter primer. And if you've ever watched my channel before, you'll know that I normally like will set a base with a powder, but I don't do that whenever I'm working with something, like when I'm working just like with shimmers. But my plan is with my index finger and the Pat McGrath shade, I'm gonna just tap it like I did the other shade. And then I'm gonna take a different fluffy brush for like science's sake. So I don't accidentally get the shimmers from the Charlotte Tilbury. I'm using a different brush. I am just blending the Pat McGrath shade before I go in with the other one. And actually what I found as I was blending that is that this shade has some sparkles in it, that were revealed as I was blending. And it kind of looks a little bit similar, but just doesn't have as much sparkle. Let's fix the sparkle situation. And I think my approach needs to be the same as with the pigmented eyeshadow, where I'm going to start with the shimmer on the outer corner of my eye and then like gently blend it in to the center of my lid. And again, I'm going to take my brush and just blend the sparkles around a little bit, just to distribute the product a little bit more evenly. I don't really know that you can tell the difference, so I'm gonna zoom in and you can let me know. On this eye is the Charlotte Tilbury. On this eye is my concoction that I made, and they look very similar. I'm gonna wrap up with some eyeliner and mascara, and then I'll be back to talk about my thoughts and where I landed. I just did a little bit of black eyeliner on the tight line, and then I added the mascara, and this is the final look. Y'all, I'm gooped and gagged. I really can't tell the difference in person. I don't think I've ever had an Eye4AnEye like go like this, where I like kind of basically did really dupe out the thing kind of almost perfectly. There's a little bit of nuance that's like lost in translation, but like, I always love doing an Eye4AnEye because it proves to me and to you that perhaps the shiny new thing isn't going to fulfill your fantasy. I'm going to make a case for as to why I think that the Charlotte Tilbury shadow adds value to my collection. Since I got this in my collection, it's kind of been like one of the only eyeshadows that I've been wanting to put on my eyes. Ever since I started using the Rowan quads, the ease of use of just like throwing one shade on that's like really impactful, something like this, I've been really enjoying that. While I was able to dupe out kind of the same exact thing with my collection, it was an eyeshadow that was in a palette and a highlighter. And so I had to use two products to get the same effect that I wanted. Now, I'm not unfamiliar with using an eyeshadow topper on top of another eyeshadow to get like the wet look effect. I'm not saying that the eye pop is adding anything. I'm not saying that the Pop Shot is adding anything like revolutionary to my collection, but it made something that would have required two steps into one step. And for me, the way that it kind of looks really rock and roll as it fades out into the evening, I love that kind of look. I think it's really chic. But again, the downfall to the Charlotte Tilbury product is that the longevity is not really good unless you are using a glitter primer. So if that is not something that you are gonna use, this is like worthless to you. But I use glitter primer all the time for shadows in my collection. So it's not something that I'm like always doing that. Like I always am doing that. So it's not like adding something new, or I'm not going out to buy another product to make that happen. I could see easily if you heard me say all that and be like, I'm out. Perfectly fine. I get it. I really have just been enjoying that. And then like doing some like, just like a really small wing, or just like adding a little bit of black shadow to make it even like darker and sexier, and then just doing black eyeliner all around the inside of my eye. That's the ticket. I think this color was pretty unique to my collection. You saw in my swatches, I have a lot of things in my collection that are close to it, but I think something about having that sparkle to it makes it more enticing to me than perhaps using this taupey shade in the Divine Rose 1 palette from Pat McGrath. Let's break down that a little bit. If you would have told me before I started that this would have been the shade that we landed on that was the closest but wasn't as sparkly as the Charlotte Tilbury one, I would have been surprised. I wouldn't have thought it would have come out of this palette. I really honestly thought the one from the Dior Quint was gonna be the closest thing I had. I think formula-wise, sort of, there's more pigment to the one from the Dior one, but it also has a lot more sparkle in it, which is what a lot of the shadows that were most similar in tone to the Charlotte Tilbury were lacking, was that sparkle, which is how we ended up having to add the Diamond Bomb on top, was to really get it as slick and wet looking as the Charlotte Tilbury. I kind of like that it came out of this palette because I do like this Mothership palette. Like begrudgingly, I like this Mothership palette. It's like so boring. It's like not the most exciting. For a one and done eyeshadow, I'm not pulling out a Mothership. I don't think about them that way. It's like, if I'm gonna construct a look where I want some special shades, yeah, sure, I'll pull out a Mothership palette. But to do something like this, I'm gonna reach for my Rowan quad first, and now that I have this is a really easy way for me to get that effect. I think something that is gonna be interesting for us to acknowledge and watch as my relationship with this progresses. Will I continue to use it when the excitement dies off for me? Because right now it's living in my top drawer, which is like where all of the things that I'm currently using that I pulled from my drawers for fall fantasy drawer, and all of the things that I'm like currently testing that are new to me. So like my My Inner Glow blush is also in there. That's like my top drawer. Those are the things that I'm always reaching for because I'm trying to understand all of those better. But once this moves into the single eyeshadow drawer, who knows what will happen, because that's often where products go to die. I know that. I still can't say to you whether or not this was like a wise purchase for me. But as of right now, I think the argument is standing more in line with it because of what I just said to you. It's everything all in one. It's not 2 steps. I just kind of blend it out. I can blend out with my finger. It's super easy. If you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you know that I'm not afraid of a complex eye look. But what I've kind of noticed with things like this and the Rowan quads, I'm wearing makeup far more than I used to. And that is the truth. I find something like that so much more fun for me to throw on a day-to-day basis as opposed to sitting down and really constructing an eyeshadow look, which is not something I hate to do anymore. It's not something that I'm moving away from completely. But in my day-to-day life, when I'm not on YouTube or I'm not feeling like the most, they're really nice to have. It's important to remember that our relationship with makeup does change and our styles in makeup do change. Because I could wake up tomorrow and be like, I want to go back to doing cut crease halo eyes all day, every day, which could happen. And that would be fine if that did happen. I'm just saying right now I'm seemingly moving into this more one and done or high impact, just high impact one and done situations. And not only that, ones that don't even have the best longevity, which if you would have said that to me 3 years ago, that like I would end up liking eyeshadows that might break down just a little bit into 2 to 4 hours, I'd be like, I would never wear that eyeshadow. But now I'm like, I kind of like the way it looks. I kind of like the aesthetic of just like a look that's gently falling apart. If that sounds bad to you, do not buy this. I don't think the longevity is as bad as I've heard other people say, especially if you're using a glitter primer. But yeah, the longevity isn't that great considering. Like if you were looking for something to wear all day, it's not it. But if you were looking for something to wear into the night and then by the end you have like a really hot, sexy, lived-in look, yeah, then I think you'd like this. I think you might get on with it. This was not a video to decide whether or not you should buy the Charlotte Tilbury eye pops. It was just to remind both you and myself that sometimes we don't need to buy the new thing, or sometimes the new thing doesn't add value. But sometimes the new thing might be different enough from what you have, even if it's close to what you have, that it does add value. And I think that's what I found out today while exploring my collection. But what I will tell you, if you do have Divine Rose 1 and this, you can get a very similar effect to Smokey Quartz. Just keep that in mind too. You might not need it. You might have 2 things in your collection to get the look, to see if it's even a look that you like. Because this is also like not the most interesting look. So maybe it wouldn't be even something that you would want. You would try it a couple times and you'd be like, I'm so glad I didn't buy that. That's like not the look I'm looking for. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see any of my other Eye4AnEye videos, I will leave the playlist up here for you to click on and down in the description box below. Most of those are full palettes. I think I was just duping out full palettes. So if you want to see something like that and that kind of activity, please watch those videos. And if you are new here and you aren't subscribed to me already and you kind of you caught the vibe and you were like, hey, I like this person, I want to be around some more, the subscribe button is right down below and it is free and I would love to have you hit it. Make sure you like this video before you leave it. And I'm also on patreon.com if you would like to support me there, but no pressure. I appreciate you all so much for watching and remember to follow your haute and you will find me. I will see you in my next video. Bye-bye. For real.